Oi, eu sou a Aymara Limma e você está assistindo Cine Arte Variety, o seu programa semanal de variedades e entretenimento. Hoje, o nosso convidado especial é o diretor francês Pitof. No currículo dele, a gente encontra filmes como Asterix e Obelix,
Obelix!
Ah, elle l'a connu.
Delicatessen,
Je suis boucher, et franc du collier, je dis les choses vues, alors comme ça au premier coup d'œil. Vous faites pas mon affaire. Vous manquez de charpente, de coffre.
City of Lost Children,
1, 2...
Quelle est la raison de ce braiement?
Mais mon petit...
Joan d'Arc,
About 10 years old, I was taking a shortcut home through the forest when a strange wind began to blow. It was such a strange sound, almost like words calling me. Everything was moving so fast. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. God had given me a message to deliver.
Alien Resurrection, Vidocq, Catwoman. Meu nome é Aymara Limma, eu tô aqui em Los Angeles e olha quem eu encontrei, o Pitof, um super diretor de cinema, e a gente vai ver o que ele tem pra contar pra gente. Pitof,
Hi.
it's good to see you.
Good to see
Thank
you
you
too,
so
eh?
much for being here with us.
A pleasure.
I wanted to start like you talking a little bit about your career, how you got started, and did you always dream from little like to be a filmmaker? Because you did visual effects before, right?
Yeah. Actually, I always wanted to be, since I'm a kid, I wanted to be a film director. I really enjoy watching movies, and I enjoy the most was the journey. As an audience, when you watch a movie, you're taken through a journey, through the actors, through the stories, through the visuals, through everything. So that's what really tempted me, was to go through that journey. But my family was not in the film business at all. My family was in the drug, not drug dealer,
Like
but like a
pharmacy?
Pharmacy. Yeah.
And they were against it? They
No.
wanted to take the business?
No, but no, I mean, that means that I didn't have any connection. I didn't have any knowledge of anything, so I didn't know how to approach this world. And actually, I approached it when I was really young. I was like 12, 13, and I was fascinated by cameras, by photos. So I bought my first camera. It was film and black and white, and I had my lab in the basement of the house. I was like developing photos, doing all the chemicals and stuff like that to get
Did you self-learn how to do that? Or?
Yeah, learn it. Yeah, I mean, it's not difficult. It's if you spend some time, read some books, and it's quite simple. So I learn, and I like to practice and to understand myself. I like to, and that's what I did all along my life, is to learn by myself. At school, I was not very good at school. I was lucky because I was good in math. So in math,
I like math too.
and math, the thing is you don't have to work. If you're good at math, you know it. So you don't spend too much time like studying and all that stuff. So I was graduated in France, math and physics.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But I didn't use it. But because it was simple for me. That's because I'm a kind of it matches with my laziness, kind of.
Did you like history? Did you like reading and stuff like that? Or?
No, I like movies. I like image. And I had and when I was a kid, I had a hard time to read. I didn't like words. I liked like image, photography, or cartoons, or comic books. And I was like really into comic books, not very much in the Superman, Batman, and stuff like that. My culture was more French. We have Tintin, we have Asterix, all this, all these cartoons.
You did work on Tintin or something?
No, on Asterix. I worked on a long time ago on Asterix.
Maman, s'il vous plaît, ne fais pas ça, César.
So I really came from that visual world, and so after when I get graduated, I didn't know how to get to the movie industry, and so I was really lost, and I went to see like a psychologist, a counselor, and stuff like that, and I did some tests. Drawing like circles, triangle, squares, and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, they found that I would be a good architect.
Oh wow!
Yeah, because the 3D and the elements. But the thing is, I figured out after that in their file they didn't have film director, so it didn't exist. As in France at that time, film director was not a real job. I mean, you have just a few directors. It was not considered as a real job. So I mean, it was not a job, but in all the files when looking for to have like a counsel for a career, nobody would tell you can be a director. Nobody would have told you that. So the closest was architect.
Wow.
And I said, architect, why not? I never thought about building a house, but I was not too bad like in drawings, painting, and stuff like that. So why not? Give it a shot. So I went into architect school for a few months, and then it was like boring. I didn't like it at all. I mean, I didn't like it. And so after 3 months, I left the architect was actually university, and then I have to wait the next year to find something else. And so in the meantime, I decided to work because I couldn't wait a year without doing nothing. So I did what I knew to do. What I could do was for photography, and then I get hired in the company as a assistant photographer and a photographer.
Oh wow!
And they were doing like a commercial. It was like a commercial slideshow. At that time, it was a long time ago, and at that time, video didn't exist. So the big companies they were using like these slideshows to promote their whatever they had to promote internally. So I did photos for that, but I always had a thought for movies, but I was always aware of maybe something may happen to me with movies. And one day I met this guy who was a friend of my boss's, and the guy was a film editor, very nice man. And I talked to him, and I told him I want to be director. What do you recommend? What would be a good path for me to be director? And the guy told me I'm a film editor, and I think editing is really a good path to understand directing. I mean, you start to be a editor, and then from that you really know and understand how movies are made. And he told me, if you want, I can take you as an apprentice. So you will know if you like it or not. And I said, okay, yeah, please, thank you. And so he took me as an apprentice. I was like 18. And the funny thing...
Which was the program they used at the time to edit?
It was
Oh,
film.
it was film, yeah.
The program was a pair of scissors
Like, no.
and tape.
I'm thinking like...
It was plastic.
Exactly.
The program
That's
was
really-
called Hands and Eyes. Hand and Eyes.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, I'm talking about like a 75.
Wow.
You were not even born.
I can't say it.
You don't say, but
I can't say it.
and so no, it was film, real film. And the funny thing is, so I was 18, and the funny thing is, the guy was cutting porn movies.
Oh. So that sounds like fun, right?
Yeah, for 20 for 18 years. Yeah, it was amazing because I was starting to work on a movie, but it was porn
Watching
movies.
porn.
Yeah.
Making porn.
Exactly. But at that time, porn, it was on film. So it was like video distribution. It was shot it was a screen in theaters.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean
France,
it was.
right? I don't
yeah,
know
in France. I don't know in
I don't know if
Brazil.
in Brazil if they do.
But in France, we have porn movies on the Champs-Élysées.
I think maybe downtown. Yeah.
No, it was still on the Champs-Élysées.
Yeah.
You have porn movies. I mean, at that time, it was it was
You
normal.
still have it until today?
No,
They have
no,
those
no.
movie theaters that just show porn?
No, because now it's on video. Since video, I mean, the day the video exists, it kills the theater for porn because people don't want to go to see a movie in the theater. They prefer having it at home.
They don't have to show them their faces there. And
Exactly,
stuff
they
like
have it at home. So it was really the golden age of porn film because it was big budget for porn movies, and it was like a story. Those real movies with a story, actresses, actors. It was, I mean, to have a comparison, it was like like an action movie, but instead of fighting, they were fucking. Exactly the same, same thing. So it was a lot of fun, and I did that for 5 years. And I was very lucky because, it was the best school ever.
Yeah.
Because I learned editing. And then my friend, Gerard, his name, became director and producer. He took me as a first assistant director. So I was also a photographer. So I was doing still photography on set. And it was really like a university. I did everything you can do on a set. Like lighting, filming, a camera operator, like electrician, grip. I had the opportunity to do every single job you can do in post-production. We were redoing the sound completely.
Wow.
So I learned to do how to edit sound, how to edit music, how to do dubbing, how to synchronize. So ADR. So
it's so hard to do ADR.
yeah, but
I was doing ADR for myself.
yeah.
It was like so hard. I had to like lips, and it was me talking. It was like okay.
Yeah, but then and the funny thing is when we were shooting porn, we didn't have any sound guy, so we shot silent because the camera was very noisy. It was a 35 millimeter camera, and it was not for sound. It wasn't soundproof, so the camera was very noisy. Yeah, it was a cheap camera, but good quality. But
And then you guys had to do the noise after.
No, because we didn't take the sound. We don't have any sound engineer. So we had to redo everything in post.
Wow.
So the dubbing, that's a very French way of doing it. I mean, you go frame by frame and you check the mouth and how it opens, close and stuff, and you put that on a tape, and you project that on the screen, and the actors have the text like flying with the image.
Wow.
So you can say bonjour. You have a bee going by the bar, and you can really, if you read in sync, you are in sync. So you have
And
first.
how did they do with emotions and stuff like that? It was not really.
It was
It
sex
was
movie.
okay, right?
Yeah,
Nobody want to see emotion right there.
Yeah, there is emotion, but the emotion was more like ha. Than reading the words. The emotion was more intense than words. So it was fun. So it was really an incredible school. And I quit porn when video came
You're funny.
because I quit porn. Actually, I never act. Maybe I should have, but I never act in porn. I act as a stand as you know
stand-in?
yeah,
You did a
actor.
stand-in?
Yeah, and I had some part where I was talking, but no porn. I was too young, maybe. Yeah. And then so when the video came, I didn't want to do porn. I wanted to make movies.
Yeah.
So and the way the thing turns out for porns was just shooting like a couple or threesome in a bed with a video camera and with no story, nothing. So it was not making movies, it was really shooting porn, and I was not into that at all. So I decided to quit porn. That's how I quit. And then I start a career.
Glad you did.
But then I get, bored, because it was corporate movies, commercial, with no, I mean, it was fine. I make
didn't create much.
Yeah, I made a living out of it. Don't get me wrong, but and it was boring, and I couldn't see how from that world I could go to the feature film world, which really I wanted. And I thought it was like a dead end, and I would be stuck here forever. So, and because I started as an editor, I was good in editing and technically, and the technical stuff, I was good with it. And then I started to get interested in video editing and visual effects. I started to do it for myself, for my movies. And I had a friend who was a director. She was a director, and her husband was a producer. And she wanted me to work for her. And when I was not working on my movies, to cut for her, to do color correction for her, to do whatever she needed technically for her in video. And I started to do it and to really enjoy it. And then her husband told me, maybe we have a lot of business. Maybe we should build a company together and start a post-production facility. That was in 85. And that's what we started. I mean, we started big. I mean, at the time, it was a small company, but I was the first to use digital technology for commercial. So I was the first to buy a machine called the Harry from Contel, which was the first digital machine at that time. And I was the first in France.
In France?
Yeah. And so we bought this machine, and we started to be very successful in commercial, music videos. So it went really well for 10 years. And from that, I always wanted to go back to feature films and to go to movies. And technology then helped me, because then the resolution getting better and better and better, and we will be able to use our video technology and knowledge to build our own high definition system. And then we build it. I mean, we built a film scanner. We wrote a software to do visual effects. I did all not the code, but I designed the software for the visual effects. And then we did pretty much all the big French movies at the time, like Delicatessen, The City of Lost Children, and so it went really, really very well.
Delicatessen, you did the visual effects?
The visual effects, yeah.
Cool.
And,
that was like a great movie.
Yeah, it's
right?
amazing. So, and I was really close with Jean-Pierre, with Genet, Caro and Genet. They were always my best friend, brothers, and stuff like that. So I'm still in touch with both of them.
And that process helped you with open the field for you to start directing your own movies.
Yeah, because at some point I was kind of forgetting being a director. When I was doing visual effects, I was successful. I liked it.
Because it became so successful in visual effects.
Yeah, and I liked it. It was not just about success. It was just I love it. I like to do things because I like it, not just for the sake of money or success. It was just because I enjoyed it, and in '96, so Jean-Pierre Genet took me with him to do Alien Resurrection, and that's where we spent 1 year here in Los Angeles, and so I was visual effects supervisor, and Jean-Pierre wanted me to be also a second lead director.
Oh wow!
So I directed like almost not half, but a big third of the movie as a director here at Fox Lot, which is incredible.
Start, right? Like a great opportunity.
Yeah, I was completely amazed and blown away, and.
These were very, very hard to come by.
So was our cargo. Whatever you got going on here ain't exactly approved by Congress.
It's a military operation.
Really?
Who are you?
Ripley Ellen, Lieutenant First Class, number 36706.
Ellen Ripley died 200 years ago. You're a thing, a construct. They grew you in a lab.
What the hell is going on here?
He is breeding an alien species.
Wish you could understand what we're trying to do here.
Now they brought it out of you.
Not all the way out.
You want to tell us what this is?
It's a queen. She'll breed. You'll die.
Ellen Ripley died trying to wipe the species out. I'm not anxious to see her taking up her old hobby.
I can feel it. I can hear it moving.
So here you like ran into these things before.
Yeah,
What did you do?
I died. We're moving.
That's a standard emergency procedure. Any serious problem and the ship autopilots back to home base.
What's home base?
Earth. I thought you were dead.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
So when I came back in Paris after this 1 year experience in Los Angeles, then it brought me confidence. Then I could be a director, because I kind of almost forget that. I was doing like commercials, like that's boring stuff, but feature is something I was like forgetting. And after this experience on Alien, suddenly I said, "Wow, I can do it.
I can do
that."
Yeah.
So I was confident enough to think, okay, now I can be director. So I started to think, looking for a subject, for scripts and stuff like that. And I had a passion. I still have this passion is to be a pilot. And
Pilot
planes.
a plane?
Airplanes, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm a stunt plane.
Oh, really?
So it's a stunt pilot. Yeah, I do aerobatic.
You do on the computer, or you go and you
No,
fly?
for
You
real.
fly, you fly, you
Yeah,
fly.
flying, yeah.
You go to Santa Monica
Airplanes.
Airport, take a plane off, and
Yeah, Van Nuys Airport and doing aerobatic.
Or Burbank.
No, Van Nuys, and I do aerobatic. I like to do
wow.
upside down and this stuff.
Wow.
So I wanted to make a movie about airplanes, because airplanes was my, it was my passion, and I couldn't find, really something I really liked. And then a friend of mine, who's a famous producer and director in France, brought me a script, and he told me, okay, I have this script called Vidocq, and it's a complicated movie with visual effects, and I'm not sure that we can do that in France. So give me advice if you think as a visual effects supervisor, this can be made here, or I have to find people to do that in America. And he told me Vidocq. And Vidocq in France is a very famous character. He's like a French Sherlock Holmes. Mm-hmm. And there was a TV series in the 60s I really liked. And I said to the guy, Vidocq, I know Vidocq, and I want to be a director now, and I think you should consider me as a director for that movie. And the guy said, okay, let me think about it. Let me process the idea. And a week after that, he called me back, and he sent me the script, and he said, okay, read the script as a director. And that was the very beginning. So I wrote the script, I loved it. We did some work on it. I rewrote part of it with the writer, and we shot it.
How do you look at the script for the first time, and what are the first things you do as a director when you pick up a script?
I mean, it was weird to me. On that level, it was weird because it was the first one, and also it was a period piece.
Oh.
So it was like set in 1830, and I was not comfortable doing like doing a period piece with costumes and stuff like that. I would, if I would have picked myself, I would have done a contemporary movie, not a period piece. So, but I was attracted by the story, and just the periods scared me a little bit, because in France we have a lot of period movies, and sometimes they are kind of really bad, tacky and stuff, and I didn't want to be on that, playing in that stuff with tacky and stuff. So I was kind of I would say I was kind of scared to go down that route, and then I start to think about it and say, okay, I have to find a way to make that movie that usually people don't do. And I was thinking, okay, I want this movie to be like more of a science fiction movie, but science fiction in the past. Wow. So like it has a name, retro futuristic. So you see the past, like if it were, so my thing was, okay, how somebody in 1800 would imagine like 10 years or 20 years later if you had to make a movie, something like that, just to project like sci-fi like that. It was like a kind of a idea in that sense. And then I start to take inspiration from the painter, because at that time the painter or the artist was a visionary with visuals. So I started to be inspired with painting really from the mid 18th century. And then I wanted to add on top of that a look which is modern, which is more digital way of filming. First, how you move the camera, what lens you use, and at that time my kids were playing like a Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, and so I watched. I'm not a gamer, but I enjoyed watch my kid playing videos, and I was looking at my son playing with Lara Croft, and I was amazed how, because sometimes you have like automatic, cameras, so the cameras jump from face, wide, POV and stuff automatically, and with a wide angle and very jumpy and stuff, fast, and I was amazed by this language, which was to me a new cinema language I wanted to apply to an old story. And that's how I came with the way I found the way I wanted to shoot the movie, and then to have a different texture for the image. I wanted to do it digitally.
Cette histoire-là, c'est de l'esbrouf. C'est pas parce que deux bonhommes se font ratatiner par la foudre que...
Un homme foudroyé, c'est un accident. Deux hommes foudroyés, c'est un complot. Melmont était le plus important fabricant d'armes de France. Viraldi était chimiste. Il fabriquait de la poudre explosive à partir de n'importe quoi.
Et alors?
C'est pas le moment d'être fait de ce côté-là. Pas le moment du tout.
Vous croyez quoi? Une attaque des Prussiens? Ce sont eux qui vous ont mis sur le trône.
Je redoute une attaque de l'intérieur.
Et qui la faute?
Rappelez-vous, Vidocq. Vous avez jusqu'au prochain.
Je vous propose un marché.
Qu'est-ce que vous avez à vendre?
Ce que vous cherchez. La jeunesse éternelle.
Pourquoi vous prévenez pas la police?
J'attends mon heure. Je connaîtrai bientôt le nom de celui qui a tout manigancé, celui qui a inspiré les trois pervers. Vidocq et moi, on était sur la même piste.
And the second crew I had here in Hollywood was bigger than any first unit crew in France.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I mean it's huge. It's a big movie, and
What the hell is wrong with you, Phillips? Your incompetence is
staggering.
All my life, I felt powerless. I've never stood up for myself. But then...
You can come out now, it's okay.
I think maybe I'm in the wrong...
Everything changed. You died, but you were reborn. By accepting all of who you are, you can be free.
She's very self-confident, almost angry.
I'm sorry, what was that? Allergies?
This person doesn't like to play by all the rules.
Amateurs.
Dee says she jumps around like a cat. What should we call her?
Catwoman. You heard of her?
Oh yeah, hot. Black leather. Whip. You're gonna look like a cop killer. I might not be a hero, but I'm certainly not a killer.
Put your hands on your head.
Ooh. Looking back on it now, dying was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Have you ever been to Brazil?
Yes. I've been
Working?
once, not working, I went for pleasure. I've been in Manaus.
Oh, you went to the jury thing,
Yeah,
right?
I was invited for a film festival, and I was a jury member. So it was like 5-6 years ago, and it was the first edition of the festival. And I had the best time ever. I really loved it.
You didn't go to Rio or Sao Paulo or?
No, I mean the plane, and we had like we had to switch plane at Sao Paulo actually, I think. But no, I mean we were on a mission, you know, going. The ticket was paid from Los Angeles to Manaus and back, and I couldn't stay longer.
E ele foi responsável pelos efeitos especiais do meu filme premiado nos Estados Unidos, O Te Amo, Shabbat Shalom.
I was born in a very spiritual family in Rio de Janeiro, where spirituality was bigger than religion created by mankind, and we believed that love and kindness could save the world. When I was a little girl, I created a ritual. It was something that made me feel connected to a higher energy when I was witnessing so much sadness. I used to get my mom cooking spoon and draw circles in the beach. Then I would ask for the gods of the ocean to wipe away all the sadness, anger, and evil in the world. Then I would draw hearts and ask for love and compassion to fill everyone's heart. I used to have dreams, and I used to dream of being an actress. By that, I could touch people's heart with love, care, compassion, happiness. I dream of being a free spirit, where I had no judgment. I could only act out of kindness, love, and sweetness. A free spirit, or not so free. I fell in love with a Jewish man, not a regular Jew, a super different Jew. I guess the gods had a different plan for me.
Gostaram? Nós também. Então vocês já sabem, Próxima sexta-feira, às 14h, temos um encontro marcado. Cine Arte Variety, aqui no VRT Channel. No próximo programa, vamos falar um pouco mais sobre o...
Good, good. How was your audition? Wait, actually, let me guess. I bet you rocked it, as always.
You wanna hear the funniest thing ever?
Tell me the funniest thing ever.
Aymara now means I am me.
I don't get it.
Honey, they say my name and they think I am me. I'm me. I'm me. I think it's...
Well, you'll get along...
What?
Well, you'll get along fine in Hollywood. I mean, there's a lot of crazy names out there.
My name is not crazy. You always say that my name is sexy and hot, okay?
Do meu filme premiado.
Yes, baby. Just like you. Sexy, hot, and beautiful.
I love you.
And I love you more. Listen, where are you?
I'm driving home.
All right. Were you able to go to the market, or do you need me to go?
No, I did get everything, so not to worry.
Great. Because I just got home, and well, listen, I was able to get the Parker Smith trial postponed.
Oh, wow.
So I'm gonna start. I will be starting the salmon tonight.
Ah, can't wait for my salmon.
Listen, are John and Julia coming over with their little brats?
I think so. I gotta call her and check it out. So I'll let you know.
All right. Listen.
O Te Amo Shabbat Shalom. E muitas outras novidades aqui no Cine Arte Variety.